Claire Barlow hadn't cried in 3 days. Not because she wasn't broken, but because her body had run out of water. Her skin, once luminous and flushed with the glow of pregnancy, was pale and windburned. Her feet were swollen from hours of walking. And now, at 8 months pregnant, she was sitting on a wooden bench at Union Station, leaning her head against her backpack, watching people who had somewhere to be. Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. Everyone passed her like she was invisible. The security guards ignored her as long as she didn't sleep. The janitors moved around her silently, occasionally muttering under their breath. And the travelers, the families, the couples, the business people, just quickened their pace. Claire pulled her coat tighter around her, instinctively shielding her belly, even though the night air had already begun to freeze through the thin fabric. Her shoes were falling apart. She'd worn them out walking to shelters that were either full or required proof of identification she no longer had. Her phone had died days ago, and she hadn't eaten since yesterday's soup kitchen bowl of something that tasted more like rust than food. The baby kick. It was the only thing keeping her from lying down and giving up. The baby didn't deserve this. Claire hadn't always been like this. She had been someone once. A woman with dreams, with a job, with a future, and a man who had said he loved her. Brandon. She had met him at a local coffee shop where she worked as a shift manager. He was charming, charismatic, said he worked in real estate, wore fitted suits, tipped well, and after just 3 weeks of knowing her, he brought her flowers every Friday and made her feel seen. By month 3 she was in love. By month 6 he had moved in. By month 9 she was pregnant and he was gone. No note, no message. Just the empty drawers and a landlord banging on her door a week later saying rent was overdue. He hadn't paid it in 2 months, and now she had 3 days to vacate or face a formal eviction. She had nowhere to go. Her parents had cut her off after her refusal to deal with the pregnancy. Her mother had called it a mistake. Her father hadn't even shown up to the intervention dinner. Claire had tried. She really had. But the doors kept closing. And now here she was, on a bench, alone, hungry, and 8 months pregnant. She closed her eyes, her head pounding. The pain of being abandoned was starting to morph into a strange kind of numbness. And then, just as the station's loudspeaker announced another late train, she felt someone sit beside her. Most people avoided her. This man didn't. He was older, probably in his 70s, dressed in a simple wool coat and a flat cap. His gloved hands folded over a cane. His face was wrinkled, eyes pale but piercing. He didn't smell like most strangers in this place. No stale beer or nicotine. He smelled of cedar and something faintly like old books. Claire sat up straighter but didn't speak. The man looked straight ahead and said, "You remind me of someone." Claire didn't answer. "Her name was Margaret," he said, as if she'd asked. "Used to sit on this very bench with me when we were kids." Still she said nothing. She didn't say much either. Just sat. Listen. But when she did speak, boy, the world listened. Claire turned her head slightly. "Is she still around?" "No. Cancer. Took her 2 years ago." "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Thank you," he replied with a slow nod. A silence settled again. Then from his coat pocket, the man pulled out a letter, worn at the edges, thick with weight, and placed it gently beside her. "What's this?" Claire asked, suspicious now. "My name's on it," he said. "But it's not for me." Before she could respond, he stood with a grunt and started walking away. "Wait," she called after him. "Who are you?" He didn't turn around. "Why are you giving me this?" He paused at the edge of the station floor, then looked back just once. "Because someone gave me a chance once too." And then he was gone. Claire stared at the envelope in her hand. The handwriting was neat, elegant, and across the top it read, "To whom it may concern, please read. George H. Ellison." She stared at it for several minutes, unsure whether to open it or throw it away. But curiosity won. She peeled the flap open slowly, carefully, as if the letter might disintegrate in her hands. Inside were 2 items: a single-page handwritten letter, and a folded document with a notary stamp. She read the letter first. "Dear reader, if you are holding this, it means I chose you. That may sound odd, and perhaps it is. But I have nothing left to lose and perhaps something left to give. My name is George H. Ellison. I was born in 1942 in Baltimore, Maryland. I made my fortune not through brilliance, but consistency. I started a small insurance company when I was 34 and ran it for nearly 4 decades. I never married. I never had children. My life was built around work and then around silence. In the past few years, I've watched people fall between the cracks. I've seen the city change and good people vanish under bad luck. And I've grown tired of wondering whether I could do more. This is my small rebellion. Attached is a deed to a home I no longer need. I've transferred ownership to the name listed on the second page. If you are that person, I hope this helps you find peace. If you are not, I trust you will get this to the one it was meant for. George H. Ellison." Claire blinked. She looked at the second page. Her name was on it. Claire L. Barlow. Transfer of ownership of property located at 921 Maple Grove Lane, Alexandria, Virginia. Signed and notarized 2 weeks ago. Her heart started pounding. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. She read the name over and over again, her fingers trembling now. And then she flipped the page again, checking for tricks. No tricks. No scams. It was real. She was now the legal owner of a home. A complete stranger had handed her the deed to a house. She looked around wildly, trying to find George, but he was gone. Disappeared into the swarm of travelers and commuters. Claire stared at the envelope again. For the first time in weeks, she felt something unfamiliar and powerful. Hope. And for the first time in months, she cried. This time not from pain, but from the feeling that maybe, just maybe, the worst was finally behind her. She had no idea what was waiting at 921 Maple Grove Lane, but she was going to find out. The morning after the bench, Claire was up before the sun, shuffling out of Union Station with the envelope clutched tightly in her fist. Her body felt different, lighter somehow, as if she'd left a layer of despair on that splintered wood where she had sat all night. Every step toward the metro was a victory. Every movement a silent dare to the universe to take this miracle away. She could barely afford a ticket to Alexandria. She counted coins in a bathroom stall, holding her breath when a janitor knocked twice. The metro ride was a blur, full of the nervous energy of people with somewhere to be. Claire pressed her forehead against the glass and watched the city turn to suburbs, the towers to trees, the noise to a soft, uncertain hush. When the train finally sighed to a stop at King Street, she stepped out onto the platform and inhaled a shaky breath. Her heart was racing, not with fear but anticipation. She had nowhere else to go. She was out of choices. And now, perhaps, she was out of reasons to doubt. She checked the map, checked it again, then started walking. The sidewalks in this part of Alexandria were wide and shaded. The lawns were clipped, the houses old but proud, with shutters in need of paint and mailboxes tilted with memory. Claire's feet ached. Every step sent pain shooting through her legs, but she pressed on. When she reached 921 Maple Grove Lane, she stopped and stared. It was nothing like she'd imagined. The house was a pale blue, small but stately, with tall windows facing the street and a wraparound porch crowned by 2 weathered rocking chairs. The garden was overgrown, dandelions peeking through a jungle of roses, but it was a real home. Home, she realized, that was now hers. She felt dizzy. She looked at the deed again, at her name printed neatly below George H. Ellison's, and for a moment, she wondered if she'd wake up on that bench, hungry and cold and alone. She climbed the porch steps slowly, as if afraid the wood might crumble beneath her. She knocked once, out of habit, out of fear that someone might answer and tell her this was all a mistake. No answer. She tried the key that had been taped to the inside of the envelope. The lock turned easily. The door swung open. The air inside was cool, scented faintly with dust and old cedar. Light filtered through the windows in golden slants, pooling on faded rugs and cracked hardwood floors. The furniture was covered in white sheets. Ghostly shapes that hinted at life paused mid-breath. Claire stepped inside, closing the door behind her. She felt like an intruder in a memory. She peeled back a sheet and revealed a sturdy old sofa. Floral pattern faded but inviting. She set her backpack down and wandered through the rooms. A small kitchen with antique appliances, a living room with a grandfather clock that had stopped at 12:37, a study with rows of dusty books and framed photographs, each featuring George at different ages, always alone or with a dog at his side. No family, no children, just George smiling quietly at the world. Claire moved through the house, her hand brushing the wall as if to reassure herself it was real. Her mind raced with questions. Who was George Ellison? Why her? Why now? She settled into the living room, sinking onto the sofa. For a moment she listened, to the hush, to her own heartbeat, to the baby's gentle stirring in her belly. Then she opened the envelope again, looking for anything she'd missed. In the crease of the notary document, a smaller scrap of paper fell out. She unfolded it carefully. Claire, if you're reading this, you've made it. I hope you find this house a good place to heal. If you need anything at all, call Mr. Bishop at the number below. He will help you. You don't owe me anything. Just don't give up. Gee. A phone number was scrawled underneath. Claire stared at it. For the first time in months she had a lifeline. She spent the next hour exploring the house, opening drawers, checking cabinets. There was food in the pantry. Canned soup, crackers, tea, bottled water, even a carton of milk in the fridge. Only a few days expired. She ate a can of soup cold, spooning it straight from the tin, savoring every bland, salty bite. She found a faded robe in a closet and slipped it on, curling up on the sofa, wrapping herself in warmth and relief. She slept for hours, deeper than she had in months, her dreams untroubled, her fears suspended. When she woke, it was evening. The world outside glowed with the soft, golden light of dusk. She sat on the porch, rocking slowly, watching as fireflies flickered in the tangled grass. For a moment she felt almost safe. But as the sun disappeared, the questions returned. Who was George? Why had he chosen her? Was it really just chance? Or was there something she didn't know? She dialed the number on the note with trembling fingers. The phone rang twice before a man answered. A deep, careful voice. Bishop speaking. Mr. Bishop. My name is Claire Barlow. George Ellison, he left me. Yes. Miss Barlow, I've been expecting your call. Is everything all right at the house? She paused, startled by how unsurprised he sounded. I think so. It's more than I ever imagined. I don't understand why he did this. There was a long pause. Then, Mr. Ellison was a private man. But he cared very deeply for the city. And he believed in second chances. He said he'd know the right person when he saw them. But I never met him before last night, Claire said, voice wavering. He just gave me the envelope and walked away. That sounds like George, Bishop replied gently. He was never one for speeches. He liked to let his actions speak. Claire pressed a hand to her forehead, overwhelmed. Is there anything I need to do? Only if you wish. The utilities are paid for a year. There's a small fund set aside for groceries and repairs. And there's a trust. A trust? Yes. Mr. Ellison left a modest sum in trust for the house's occupant. For emergencies. The details are in a binder in the study. Claire felt dizzy again. It was all too much, too fast. She thanked him, barely managing to keep her voice steady. After she hung up, she went to the study and found the binder. A thick leather folder labeled House, Maple Grove. Inside was everything she could need. Paperwork, instructions, bank statements, and a note that read simply, "Use this wisely. You owe nothing to anyone." She spent the next days restoring the house piece by piece. She aired out the rooms, scrubbed the kitchen, dusted the old books. She washed every plate and cup, changed the linens, and threw open every window. Neighbors noticed her quickly. On the third morning, an older woman with sharp eyes and a cane knocked on her door. Her name was Mrs. Covington, and she'd lived next door for 40 years. She came bearing a casserole dish and a list of phone numbers. Local doctors, grocery delivery, taxi service. She didn't ask questions, just welcomed Claire with a brisk nod and left with a promise to check in again soon. Claire called the local clinic and booked a checkup. She was 8 months, a little underweight but otherwise healthy. The nurse smiled at her gently, patted her hand, and sent her home with vitamins and a reminder to rest. For the first time in ages, Claire let herself hope. But each night, as she curled in bed and listened to the wind in the trees, she wondered about the man who had given her all this. She wondered if he had watched her at the station, seeing more in her than she saw in herself. One afternoon, while sorting through a drawer in the study, Claire found a photograph tucked behind a row of envelopes. In it, George stood in front of the house, arms slung over the shoulders of a much younger woman. Her face was familiar, something about her eyes, the tilt of her smile. On the back was scrawled, M&G, Summer 1972. Margaret. Claire traced the outline of the woman's face, feeling a strange ache. Who was she to George? A sister? A lover? She looked so much like Claire herself, it made her breath catch. She began to wonder if maybe the choice of recipient hadn't been as random as she thought. She spent her days bringing the house back to life, and her nights reading George's old books. She learned to sleep again, lulled by the safe, silent walls and the promise of new beginnings. But one morning, less than 2 weeks after she arrived, she woke to a pounding on the door. Her heart leapt. She hurried to the porch, one hand on her belly. A man stood on the steps, a young man, tall, with dark hair and haunted eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said, his voice rough. I'm looking for George Ellison." Claire froze, the fear of loss creeping in around the edges of her newfound peace. He's gone. I'm sorry." The man's face crumpled. "Gone?" She nodded, heart pounding. He pressed his hands to his face. I should have come sooner." "Did you know him?" she asked hesitantly. He looked at her, eyes searching. "He was my grandfather." For a long moment they stared at each other, the quiet between them heavy with things unsaid. "I'm Claire," she offered softly, uncertain. He hesitated, then nodded. Ethan Ellison." The man stepped inside, looking around the house as if searching for ghosts. "He left you this house." She nodded, explaining the bench, the letter, the deed. Ethan listened quietly, then sighed. "He always did things his own way. I only found out about him a few months ago. My mother died, and she told me the truth before she went. I never knew my real father. Never knew George existed." He looked at Claire, and for the first time she saw the same eyes, the same haunted kindness she'd glimpsed in the old man at the station. "I came to find him," Ethan said. "To tell him I existed. But I was too late." Claire's heart broke for him. She gestured for him to sit. "He'd have liked to meet you." Ethan smiled, a ghost of hope on his lips. "I'd like to think so." For hours they talked. Ethan told her of his life, growing up in foster homes, always wondering why he never quite fit in, why he always felt untethered. Claire listened, sharing pieces of her own story, the pain and the loneliness, the miracle of the house, the hope it had given her. As the afternoon faded into evening, Claire realized that the house, for all its silence and solitude, was filling with something new. Connection. Family. When Ethan left that night, he promised to return. He asked nothing of her, only left her with the sense that the house at Maple Grove had been meant for more than just healing old wounds. It was meant to bring lost people together. For the first time, Claire wondered if the miracle on the bench wasn't the end of the story, but only the beginning. But not everything was settled. Not every door was closed. Because as she drifted off to sleep that night, her hand resting on her belly, Claire heard a new sound, soft, insistent. Car door slamming in the night. Footsteps crunching on the gravel outside. Someone else was coming. And not everyone was ready to let the past go. Claire stood still in the dark hallway, her hand resting lightly on the doorframe. Outside, someone was moving, slow, deliberate footsteps crunching across the gravel driveway, just beneath the porch steps. She turned off the lamp beside her and waited in silence, her pulse beating in her ears. There was a knock, not loud, not aggressive, but steady. She crossed the living room slowly, heart in her throat, and peered through the peephole. A woman stood on the porch. Late 50s, maybe early 60s. Expensive coat. Designer bag slung across one shoulder. Her hair was styled in sharp layers that hadn't wilted despite the humidity, and her posture screamed money. And purpose. Claire opened the door just an inch, her voice cautious. "Can I help you?" The woman gave her a hard smile. "You must be Claire Barlow." Claire didn't answer. "I'm Joanna Ellison," the woman said, voice clipped. "George was my brother." Claire blinked. "Brother?" Joanna sighed. "I want to be very clear. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to understand what exactly happened before I start speaking to lawyers." Claire's stomach twisted. Joanna noticed. "Don't worry. I'm not here to kick you out. Yet." She stepped forward. "May I come in?" Claire hesitated, then opened the door wider. The last thing she needed was a scene on the front porch. Joanna moved through the living room with the confidence of someone used to owning spaces. She glanced around, taking in the draped furniture, the stacked books, the soft chaos of a house that had recently come back to life. She sat. Claire remained standing. Joanna's eyes landed on her belly, and she arched a perfectly groomed brow. "Do soon." Claire nodded silently. "Do you know how you're going to raise it?" Joanna asked bluntly. "A baby, I mean. Do you have a plan? A job?" Claire's jaw tightened. "George gave me the house. Legally." Joanna waved her hand. "I know. I've seen the documents. I've spoken to Mr. Bishop." Claire blinked again. "I told you. I'm not here to evict you. But I need answers. Because my brother spent his entire life avoiding sentimentality. And then, out of nowhere, he gives a whole house to a pregnant stranger." She leaned forward. "Does that sound like him?" Claire opened her mouth, then closed it again. Joanna's tone softened just slightly. "Tell me what happened." So Claire did. She told her about the bench, the letter, the moment of kindness that changed everything. She spoke about how George never said his name, how he just sat beside her and listened. She told her about the trust, the binder, the phone call to Bishop. About Ethan showing up and claiming to be George's grandson. At the mention of Ethan, Joanna's expression shifted. "You've met him?" "Yes," Claire said. "He told me he was George's grandson. His mother never told him who his real father was until she died." Joanna looked away, her face pale now. Claire took a step closer. "Is he lying?" Joanna closed her eyes for a long moment. Then she whispered, "No, he's not." Claire sat down slowly. Joanna stared out the window, her voice distant now. "I never told anyone. Not even George. Not even when she called crying years later. I thought she was just trying to stir up drama." Claire leaned in. "Who?" Joanna looked at her. "Margaret." Claire froze. "She was our cousin," Joanna said. "More like a sister to George, really. They were inseparable as kids. Until she ran away." Claire remembered the photo she found. The woman smiling beside George in front of the house. Her features familiar. She disappeared when she was 22. Came back 5 years later with a baby. No father. No explanations. Claire's heart pounded. "She told me just once that the baby was George's. That she'd made a mistake and that it had never been supposed to happen that way. I told her she was crazy. That George wasn't like that." Claire swallowed. But what if she was telling the truth? Joanna nodded slowly. Then Ethan is his grandson. And that would explain everything. Claire sat back stunned. Joanna sighed. George never married. Never had kids. At least not officially. But maybe he knew. Maybe he found out. Maybe he looked for them. And when he couldn't find them, he settled for watching from afar. Claire whispered. Or maybe he found Ethan too late and then found me. Joanna looked at her. What does that mean? Claire hesitated. She hadn't told anyone the truth. Not even Bishop. But now it felt like the moment to say it out loud. Brandon, she said, voice cracking. The man who got me pregnant. He told me his last name was Rivers. Said he worked in real estate. But he lied. About everything. Joanna narrowed her eyes. What are you saying? Claire walked to the study, grabbed the binder, and flipped open the pages. She retrieved a sheet of paper and handed it to Joanna. It was Brandon's real estate license. One Claire had finally found online after piecing together the truth. His real last name was Ellison. Joanna's face went white. Claire said it out loud. Brandon is George's son. Silence filled the room like thunder. Joanna stared at the document. That's not possible. Claire nodded. He's the one Margaret gave birth to. George and Margaret, they had a child. And he grew up never knowing. He ended up with me. And when I told him I was pregnant, he ran. Joanna gripped the armrest of the chair. Oh my God. Claire's voice was barely a whisper. That means George knew. He found out about me through Brandon. Maybe he saw what Brandon had done, leaving me on the street. And he decided to break the cycle. Joanna looked at her, tears in her eyes now. He gave you the house. Because you were carrying his grandchild. Claire nodded. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The weight of what had been hidden for decades settled over them both. Joanna stood slowly, almost reverently. I need to speak to Bishop. And to Ethan. We need to make this right. You need protection. And your child. Your child is an Ellison. Claire exhaled. It all made sense now. A letter. The trust. The house. It wasn't random. It was a reckoning. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. Joanna helped Claire set up a formal trust in the baby's name. Ethan returned, overwhelmed to discover he had a half-brother and a nephew on the way. He and Claire grew close, not romantically, but like family bound by strange and unexpected roots. The story made the rounds quietly in the legal community, an old man's final act of redemption. But Claire never went public. She didn't need to. She had what mattered. When her son was born, she named him George Brandon Barlow, a bridge between the man who gave her a second chance and the man who nearly stole her future. On the day she brought him home from the hospital, Claire sat on the same porch where it had all begun and watched the sun rise through the trees. She wasn't broken anymore. She wasn't invisible. She was a mother, homeowner, a survivor. And thanks to a man on a bench, she was more than that. She was a legacy. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story and tell us where you're watching from.